Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be thinking about the next in our series on Matthew, the Magi visit the Messiah. And if you haven't watched the previous one, I'll put the little link up there, you can click on that and go and watch the last couple in this series. Please may I say at the outset of this video, by the way, if you like these videos then please do click on the thumbs up button down below, it does help me out, and please do click on the subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos like this. I will be continuing on this series, and perhaps by the time you watch this I may be doing other things as well, so please do click on the like, the thumbs up and the subscribe and everything. I do appreciate it. Now, in good storytelling, one of the things which is important, or I think it's important anyway, is the kind of the ability to show a point rather than simply come out and tell it, so the story itself shows something rather than it actually having to tell you what the point is. I think that's good storytelling. It helps us to understand things in a way that perhaps just coming out and saying doesn't. And I think that's what we've got going on in this passage from Matthew here, that it helps us to understand the point about how we should respond to Jesus in a way that it wouldn't if it just simply told us. That here it's actually Matthew showing us the right response to Jesus. Now, there are several different responses to Jesus in this passage, and we'll pick them out as we go through and think about what Matthew is trying to tell us. That he begins by saying after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. So Matthew he's missed out a lot. As we know from Luke's Gospel, there was a census. That was why they travelled up to Bethlehem. There was details about all of the various other things that happened. He doesn't even talk about the shepherds in this. He just jumps straight from Jesus was born in Bethlehem during the time of King Herod. It says Magi came from the east. Now, so I think very often our picture of this is painted mostly by Christmas cards and from the nativity scenes rather than actually the Bible. And this is one area where I do think that nativity scenes, Christmas cards, all that, they can be very unhelpful, because they usually have a picture of a drafty stable with an open door, or they usually have the shepherds and the wise men all there together and so on, and it's a very romantic kind of scene. But the thing is, it's not true. It's not how it happened. The wise men probably came when Jesus was maybe about 2 years old, a toddler, rather than a tiny baby. And we know that from the words that they were used, and it talks other things as well. So Jesus, and of course it explains why Herod did what he did a bit later on in this section. By the way, if you want to read it, I should have said this at the beginning, if you want to read it, then I'll put the link underneath. Please do feel free to pause the video, go and read the passage, and just take a minute, and then come back to this. And I'll put the link. If you expand the description below, you can click on that and you can read it. So the wise men come when Jesus is probably about a toddler rather than a little baby, and they come from the east. Now, who were they? What were they doing? No one really knows, and it's rather frustrating actually. It's a complete mystery who they were. But all we know is that in those days the heavens and the earth were seen to be more connected than they are now. I think since the days of Copernicus and Galileo and so on, we've got a very different view of the earth and the stars and the universe, and we know about planetary motion and all that sort of thing. But in those days it was very much more the case that people would see the heavens and the earth as being connected, and things happening in the heavens kind of connected to events that were happening on the earth. And of course people still do believe in, well, I'm not sure many people really believe in it, but in astrology it's still in newspapers and so on. You can, your star sign and so forth. But anyway, whoever these Magi were, all we know really is that there's more than one of them, but there may or may not have been three. I've heard that they quite often travelled in convoys of about 8 or 12 or something like that. The three comes from the three gifts, and that's the only reason that we think there were three wise men. Anyway, apart from that, they come to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem, of course, would have been the capital city of Israel at that time. And they come to Jerusalem and they ask, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." So they come and they understand that this star, whatever it was that they saw, indicated that there was a new king. They saw its significance, and they said they've come to worship him. And you think, what an amazing thing for these people who are Gentiles. They're not Jewish. They don't belong to the people of Israel. But here they have come to worship the baby king, or the infant king. And you think, what an amazing thing that God brought these people across from many, many miles to just to worship Jesus. It's incredible to think, isn't it? But Herod, he hears this and he's disturbed, it says, and all Jerusalem with him. All the people are in uproar, and naturally so, you would think, because there's a new king that's been born. There's King Herod, but all of a sudden there's a new king. You think, what? Can you imagine if someone came to London and said, "Oh, I hear there's a new king that's been born," and people think, what? Well, actually, people would probably dismiss him. But in these days, in these circumstances, this was a significant thing. These were significant people who came to Jerusalem, and everyone in Jerusalem would have heard about it and would have been talking about it and thinking, what's going on? A new king? But there's Herod. But what does that mean? Does this mean that God's working finally in the world? Could this be the Messiah? And so on. So Herod, he hears about it, and he calls together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, and he asks them where the Messiah was to be born. And this is the thing, he knows, he understands this is God's Messiah, God's chosen one, as we were thinking about in the previous videos. This is God's chosen one. Where was he going to be born? And the teachers and the chief priests and the teachers, they say in Bethlehem in Judea, and they quote a prophecy from the book of Micah, "You Bethlehem." So they know that the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem. And as I was thinking about this, it just struck me as being very interesting that the chief priests and the teachers of the law know that the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem, and yet they seem not to understand that the wise men might be looking for the Messiah, and that therefore it may be a good thing to go with them and to find the Messiah. It's interesting, isn't it, that they have that knowledge, but they don't have they don't put it into practice, if you like. They just have the knowledge and stick with that. And so it's up to Herod, who calls the Magi secretly, and he sends them to Bethlehem and says, "Go and search carefully." He says, "Report to me so that I too may go and worship him." Well, we know that those are deceitful words. Those are not true. He doesn't intend at all to worship him. Well, after they hear the king, they go on their way, and the star goes ahead of them until it stops under the place where the child was. So I don't know how on earth that's supposed to work, being sort of scientifically minded, but there we go. They find the house, they find the place where Jesus is, and they're overjoyed, and they come into the house, and not the stable, by the way, the house, and they see the child with his mother, and they bow down and worship him there, and they give him treasures of gold and frankincense and myrrh. By the way, the Bible doesn't specify any reason why they give gold, frankincense and myrrh. I think there probably is some kind of significance, but whether it's as in the traditional carol, that "We Three Kings of Orient are," and "Gold the King," and so on, whether that's the traditional, whether that is the right understanding, I don't know. but they give 3 gifts anyway, and it certainly indicates that Jesus is special, that Jesus is not just an ordinary child, but that he is a king, he's royal. As we've seen actually that from the line of David, that Jesus is God's promised chosen king. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they return to their country by another route. And we see why in the next passage, why that is, that it's important for them to return another way, not to alert Herod. So what can we learn about responding to Jesus from this passage? Because what I was really struck by is the different responses to Jesus. You see, the Magi, whoever they were, they're almost completely unknown. They come out of nowhere and they disappear again, never to be heard from again in the Bible. They come, they see Jesus, they come to worship him. And you think, what an amazing thing that people who have no background in the Old Testament, they don't know the Hebrew scriptures or anything like that, but they know that this star indicates a king and indicates that they must go and worship. And I think that says a lot about them, that actually that they're coming to worship Jesus. By contrast to Herod. Herod is someone who is Jewish. He knows about the Old Testament. He knows the promise of the Messiah, as we've seen. And yet his reaction to Jesus is one of jealousy, one of deceitfulness. Now, rather than going to worship him himself, he wants instead to eliminate Jesus, as we see from next week's reading. Those 2 completely contrasting pictures, either to come and worship Jesus or to want to be rid of him. And there are also others as well, like the chief priests and the teachers of the law, the ones who knew Jesus would have been born in Bethlehem. Where were they? Now, why did Herod have to send off the wise men, the Magi, to Bethlehem? Why didn't the chief priests and the teachers of the law go? Did they not believe? Did they think it was a load of rubbish? Who knows? Why didn't they go? And the people who were in Jerusalem, again, they were disturbed by this news. But where were they going and asking them? Where were they kind of to actually going with the wise men maybe and finding and seeking Jesus? So here we have the wise men, the Magi, coming from outside the people of the Jews, from outside God's chosen people, and coming to worship Jesus when his people, especially King Herod, were just couldn't care less. It says something about our responses to Jesus, I think, in that to even today, this is what different people, the different reactions that people can have. Sometimes people think, we know it all, but we don't really care. We don't really need to go and worship Jesus. I can know a bit about the Bible or Bible stories, but I don't really need to go and to worship Jesus. Or people who just don't want Jesus to be part of their lives, who'd rather say, I'd rather live my life without him. I would rather live my life without him being king. I just don't want him to be king over my life. I'd rather be my own king. Or then there's the wise men, people who come from afar, who know that they are far from God, and yet who know that God has made it possible to come to him through Jesus, to come and worship him, to come and worship Jesus, and to kneel at his feet and give him the best of what they have to bring. All of those different contrasting pictures about the different responses that we can have to Jesus. I think I'd just like to finish with the question, which most closely matches your response? Are you someone who would rather not have Jesus be part of their lives in any meaningful way? Or are you someone who maybe knows all about it, who knows all of the Bible stories, and yet doesn't really want to come and worship? Or are you someone who knows that you've come from afar, you've been lost, but now you're found, and you've come to Jesus, to the one who brings people near to God, and come to worship him? I think this is a wonderful contrasting picture of Matthew, showing us the different ways to respond to Jesus, and what the right way of responding to Jesus is in these magi, the ones who come from afar, who come to Jesus and come and worship him, the one who brings us near to God, as we saw in the last video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful. Just a reminder again, please do click the like, the thumbs up and the subscribe button, and I hope to see you again for another one of these videos very soon. God bless.